After a week full of speculation, the Israeli parliament votes today on whether to dissolve the current government and go to early elections scheduled for March 17th. Arab media reports that two Hezbollah operatives, one high-ranking, were killed in the airstrikes yesterday in Syria, allegedly carried out by the Israeli Air Force targeting sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems. And another night of protests against recent police killings across the United States, this time turned violent in Berkeley as demonstrators threw rocks and bottles at police officers and shut down a freeway.
The News Today with David Matlin.
Hello and welcome to the program here this evening. Well, currently Israel's parliament, the Knesset, is voting and debating on a move to disperse and move to new elections, despite reported last-minute maneuverings by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to set up an alternate coalition. We'll have the results for you here as they emerge. Well, new polls from the last days show a surprising support for the opposition, led by Labour Party's Yitzhak Herzog, if he recruits some big names into his party. Well, now it's 99 days until the elections on March 17th, with many twists and turns to come in the campaign. Tonight, we'll go to our correspondents at the Parliament in Jerusalem, Eli Ochenberg, Daniel Ike, and Falah Habib. But first, a look back.
I think that the situation that we are going to new elections after 2 years is not something that is good for the country.
ההחלטה היא אכן של ראש הממשלה כתוצאה מהפחד שלו מהשרים, אבל זאת ההזדמנות.
Maybe it's time for a change, and I'm calling upon them to come with us. This is a big opportunity to make that change.
ويبدو أن هناك تفاهمات ما بعد الانتخابات بين نتنياهو والمتدينين.
ברור לכולנו שטובת המדינה לנגד עינינו, ואנחנו שואפים בכל דרך לקחת ולהוביל אותה לכיוון אחר לחלוטין.
Joining us are Professor Yossi Yona from the Department of Education at Ben-Gurion University and Dr. Raanan Gisin, former senior advisor to the late Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Thank you both for joining us here.
Thank you.
Professor Yona, what are your impressions of today's debate and vote in the Parliament and the Knesset and this process leading up to this? Anything unusual or surprising to you in this process?
Well, look, we talked about, I guess it was last week, and you were asking me about the possibility of the prospect, and I said, well, it's very likely that we're going to see the dissolvement of the government. Now, in retrospect, we say, well, it is inevitable that the process would lead to the collapse of the current government, and we are entering a new election campaign. And again, you know, it is inevitable because we talked about it before, and I said, well, the marriage between Lapid and Netanyahu was never natural, you know, a little bit aberration, you know, of nature. And it seems that we were right at the very beginning that it would not hold for a long time, and indeed it collapsed. And maybe it is good, and it is good. Maybe it would be good time for change, you know. Bob Dylan singing times are changing.
Optimistic.
So yeah, so maybe it would be good for our country that we would see some change.
Dr. Gisin, today's events, or at least this chapter of politics here in Israel, how does this compare to other chapters in Israel's history of politics to you?
I think the parties are the same. The political system has its mishaps, and it was never perfect. But in recent times, and I'd say, even when we're talking about not Sharon. Sharon, you know, was a leader, but Rabin, and even when we talked about Olmert, there was some sense of leadership, you know, that there. Here, you have parties, you have members of the parties, you have people who are contending for personal reasons, But that kind of leadership that we had in the past, that is not seen as present in the present elections. You know, the election is the last choice, but a choice by default, because there was no other choice. Not because we went to election because we wanted to change the system and we wanted to change but because we had no choice. And the lack of leadership, which I see as the main cause, that is the difference between Sharon's time and today's time. And at Sharon's time, at least, there was leadership.
Well,
there was a
new
direction.
New leadership, what the country is
right.
seeking.
And therefore, there was a possibility to avoid election. But we were driven into election because there was no other choice.
We'll come back to this discussion. Well, summing up the day in Parliament today is I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg.
After 671 days and a few hours since the last polling day, the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, votes today to disperse, thus officially paving the way for new elections. Even without the vote, it was clear, as it has been for the past week, that elections were in the air. Before the vote, the lawmakers engaged in a marathon of passing last-minute legislations in keeping with the high energy that swept the parliament corridors today. For moments, it almost looked like a celebration. Lawmakers said that it was simply in anticipation of a much-needed change.
Usually, when there is a dissolving of the Knesset, the adrenaline is high, both in coalition, both in opposition. I am in the opposition. I wanted so much to shorten the life of this government. I am glad. I am happy.
Look, it's better to smile than to cry, but I must say that it's not a very happy day today. I think that the situation that we are going to new elections after 2 years is not something that is good for the country.
It is a reason for great hope. We certainly hope that this government, that its policy has been led us to disasters in so many aspects, will change to a different government.
Party leaders were less festive.
זאת ההזדמנות.
This is the opportunity in these elections to replace the current prime minister and create a different government.
ממשלה אחרת.
This is the time to set aside egos and find the right outline to enable all of us to work together as one bloc, meaning an especially large Labour Party.
Judging by the atmosphere in the Israeli parliament today, the March 17th deadline could not have been more welcome.
Well, Professor Yonah, now, a lot of talk of change coming out of especially opposition politicians here. How realistic do you think the prospect is for real, tangible change in Israel?
Look, let me say something about the reasons that brought about, the collapse of the government. I think that the main crisis was within the right-wing camp. And this crisis, I think, was brought up or about by the paralysis in the peace process. And when there is a paralysis, of course, there is a reaction, there's an unrest in the occupied territories. And that was an opportunity for someone who wanted to show himself as he is more right-winger than Netanyahu, which means Naftali Bennett, portraying himself as he is the new leader, the emerging leader of the right. And that pushed Netanyahu into the corner. And I think that actually, this is the crisis eventually that brought the collapse of the government, is not the challenges that brought upon by the left-wing camp as much as the right-wing camp. And that he was sort of even led into the corner whereby he had to, as I said before, to portray himself as the real leader of Israel. And he had to make a decision against his will, entering into this sort of bringing about the dissolvement of the government. And then, as we saw, and I think Dr. Gissing was saying that he showed a little bit of, if you wish, like courage when he declared that, well, I'm not afraid going into this election campaign. But the moment that it was determined that we're going to elections and possibilities came up,
you feel that he's afraid.
Exactly,
that he's afraid of it.
Exactly. That is
like
going to
in
be
the jungle. When you fear, the fear that comes changes the name of the game.
And it seemed, by the way, that the fear was substantiated, the first tangible, because we've seen other polls. And as if, in animal life, when you show fear, the other animals
surrounds
the predators will come to get
They're
you.
ready to pick
and then the public sees that.
Well, recent polls now, the recent polls indicate that there may be some upswing in support for the center-left if a coalition could be formed. Again, to you, the same question, Dr. Giesin. What chance for real change do you see emerging from a future government?
I don't see much change. I don't think there will be much change. You're going to see perhaps new members in the coalition as a short-term event in order to create a government. So you're going to get the religious parties in. That's the easy way out. Netanyahu is looking for a way. Then he says, well, let's strike a deal with the religious part. We'll get them into the part, and then we get Lapid out, and the religious party's in.
Well, what about the prime minister? What about Netanyahu now? This seems to be a true referendum on Netanyahu right now. That there's really almost no left or right involved in this.
Exactly.
It's about Netanyahu. Who can
May I
beat
say
him?
something about that? I think there is a combination: lack of leadership, lack of constancy, if you wish. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that the public has been, feeling fed up because I think that Netanyahu displaying a little bit of smugness, and the mannerism of his leadership, as if we're talking about the royal family, and a Byzantine palace.
Which have been many metaphors about the Netanyahus in the last decade, about the royal dynasty.
Exactly. And well, I've got to repeat an assertion that we all know. Power corrupts. And even that, and I don't mean it in a bad way. Staying too long in power, you're sort of acquiring some kind of habits, some kind of customs, as if I'm the king. And it might be, if he continues on, maybe you want to compete with Arjuan, building like this huge palace, and he is the king of Israel, and maybe it's going to be named after his name or his father's name, Bibi Palace. And I think that the people feel that. And we are, in a way, in a very important way, we are a democracy, and people don't like this sort of to see, if you wish, that power is being inherited, or the power is being, of continuously being held by the same person.
On television, you watch television. Apart from the political, there's the Bibi boom. The story of the Bibi boom, something that attracts people's attention. I think what the political system lacks is the same type of Bibi boom, because Netanyahu did not provide that, and all the other alternatives were not right. They're not there, and I think what people are seeking for, and they're saying some hope. Something new, something different than what it is, and now they look at what they and say we're going to get more of the same kind. What is this election going to do? The people are despaired because they're not seeing any hope and the left is not able to put itself together to present a real.
We see that now. Yitzhak Herzog, the head of the Labour Party, now emerging in recent days, at least, in front of the cameras, seeming as a leader of this left, of an opposition that's really been feckless, been ineffective in this last government.
The era that we have like these gigantic leaders has gone, So maybe we have to be more humble and more modest. When we are sort of having expectations of our leaders. I think that Herzog have the qualifications, and at least, we might say, and I think that we agree about that I don't think that we can say in a definite way that Netanyahu has the characteristics or qualifications that outpower, Herzog in a very determinate, in a very definite way. I think that, look, who would think at the time, Dr. Gissin, about Sadat being a courageous leader? I mean, he was deputy to Nasser, and then he emerged and actually changed the Middle East. So we've got to be hopeful and say, well, look, maybe when people coming into power, we're giving them the chance, and see, they might be able to pull something off, and bring a better future to our really anguishing country, anguishing state. And I hope that actually signals a real change for all of us. Of course, I'm affiliated with a party, but nonetheless, before we are affiliated with a party, we're Israeli citizens. We're concerned about our country. We want the better for our country.
And the Prime Minister panicked to some degree, calling these elections, dissolving the government. You think this was a mistake? Did he panic a bit here?
In retrospect, yes.
What's your take on that? Did he make a mistake here? Did he try to go back on?
The situation around us is so bad that people are looking for some ray of hope, and that's where we're usually. When Sadat came, That was a ray of hope, but
Egyptian
it was
leader, yes.
but it was surrounded by an approach, a policy. They wanted to change the thing. Now
Heavily supported by the United States.
We have Moshe Kahlon. Okay, Kahlon, but there's nothing. He belongs to the Likud. He comes with an offer because there's no one else who's offering something new, and people get tired of hearing the old lies.
He's appealing to the things that
and
matter
the
to
economic
people, cost of
conditions
living,
of their life. So they think, well, at least we'll get maybe with Moshe Kahlon something better.
The mysterious Messiah.
Well, which was what many expected from Yesh Atid's leader.
Exactly, and I think, and I hope, really.
But he will join with the right. He won't go with the left.
So I think that if the Labour Party is smart, about managing its election campaign, would say in a very clear way, you vote Kahlon, Bibi stays, and power. And they've got to think very, very carefully about,
who's their man? Who's the leader?
About following again, another false messiah of saying, well, I've got the solution. I don't know. I mean, we didn't hear much about a comprehensive, a very detailed vision vis-a-vis economic affairs or international affairs.
You say the country's let down with Yair Lapid, who basically was elected on that platform.
And I
the fresh
think
voice.
exactly, and I think that it might be, and I hope that this is the case, that the Israeli public is becoming a bit mature and saying that we are not going to follow again a false messiah, or at least tell us what is your agenda, what are you offering us in a detailed way, and then we decide, well, if we like what you're saying, your promises and what have you, though like many politicians, they tend not to fulfill,
Do you think that's one of the attractions to a politician like Naftali Bennett on the right, who at least he's clear about where he stands? People know who this person is.
But look, if for example, Naftali Bennett does, it's very clear. But Kahlon, there is something offering, there's something new that can. And if Bibi Netanyahu decides to try and bring Kahlon back, you think
he'll try that?
Right, against his better wishes, maybe something will change. Maybe that will create
It would be a mistake, though.
What?
On part of Netanyahu would be a mistake. I think that if I want...
That's why he should do it.
No. No. Why? What I think that if the best thing for him, vis-a-vis Kahlon, is that he lets Kahlon run separately, independently, and then I'll try to form a government coalition with him. That would be the right move. Because that way, what you're going to do is that you say, well, people are disappointed with me, fine, go and vote Kahlon. Well, then I would have a coalition government with these men. So this is what I'm saying, that the Israeli public should say, well, we're mature enough for all these, sort of false promises. We want a real change. A real change is really creating a new agenda for Israel. Though, I think that what you're saying, what is the possibility, the prospect of having no reality following the new elections? We don't know. Because I think, nonetheless, we've got to do some coalition with the right wing in order to bring at least about some changes vis-a-vis the Palestinian, vis-a-vis the international...
We'll come back to this in a moment. Our correspondent Eli Ochenberg standing by outside of the Knesset, the Knesset, the parliament here in Jerusalem. Eli, what's the atmosphere there today? Certainly an unusual day for the parliament.
Absolutely. It felt like a high school graduation day, David. People coming, going, talking, laughing. Many of the parliament members are well aware that it might very be their last day on parliament. They might not come back to the next session. So a very festive atmosphere, we can say. As for now, the formal official vote on dissolving the parliament is still not being discussed in the plenum. They're still discussing the anti-infiltration law, which was one of the many heated debates this parliament had. But this vote is very symbolic, because the planning and scheming and plotting already began last week. And the most interesting aspects of today's in the parliament was not what happened in the big hall in the plenum, but all the small talk, the behind-the-scene conversations that happened in the corridors of the parliament in Jerusalem.
Did anything surprise you there, Eli? You spoke with some of the politicians there today. You've been there. You said it's been an air of festivity somewhat at the parliament. Did that surprise you?
Well, the explanation of most of the parliament members was that the joyful atmosphere was because these elections are felt by many as a very needed ones, a very wanted ones, either to strengthen the ruling parties, the ruling powers position, or to outwin those exact same powers. So everybody are very looking forward to March the 17th. But we will of course discuss it intensively in the upcoming months. But there are still many unsolved issues. We still don't know what will happen with the center-left bloc that is now trying to establish a joint list. We still do not know who will lead the ruling Likud party. Benjamin Netanyahu has a very tough competition with former Likud member Gideon Sa'ar, if he will indeed decide to run against him. So many unresolved issues. We will of course discuss them intensively in the upcoming weeks, but as for now, we're still waiting for the official vote to be the trigger of the election time here in Israel.
Well, thank you very much. Eli Ochenberg reporting from Jerusalem inside the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. Yes, Professor Yonah.
A lot of wide smiles and these funeral ceremonies, it's very weird. The ceremony, actually. I want to go back to the issue that you raised vis-a-vis our friend here, Naftali Bennett, and you said that at least with this leader, with this man, he has a clear agenda.
An ambitious politician, someone who clearly wants to rise to the top. Yeah,
well, it's natural and to be expected, and why not, But I think that the problem is that when you have a clear cut and solutions to very complicated problems that might show lack of sincerity. It is easy to come and to say, well, look, okay, we have some unrest in East Jerusalem, would have the Israeli army and will reoccupy the East Jerusalem. It is really sorry to say that it is a childish way of approaching a complicated matters. So we need a policy, we need a vision, and a vision of more force, because it has not been exercised sufficiently. That would not be a solution to the really bloody.
Who's bringing that vision today? Who in the next few months? Who will emerge as the next one with the vision for the country?
The thing is that the solution is I must say that the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is very, very clear. We're talking about two-state solutions. Nobody deviates from that. Nobody gives less or more than that. That is the solution. This is the only option put on the table. We've got the Arab Initiative, and I think that it is an opportunity to come to Israeli public really with responsibility to say, hey guys, our beloved people. There's no other way. We've got to live in peace with these people. Of course, they might be stubborn. They might have excessive claims. We're not going to relent. We're not going to give.
Dr. Nissen, you think this is the central issue to this election campaign? It seems like a back burner issue now.
Look, the thing is, we think that the only solution now is the election, but the election is a short-term solution to the problem. The real problem is what he said. The real problem is a problem with the Palestinian, the intifada that is going, the surroundings around us. And for that, you need the vision of a leader. You need someone to come out with an action.
Well, you speak highly of former
the election
leaders.
will be short-lived, and immediately we will have ourselves a real war.
Who inspires you now? Again, who are you seeing as a potential new leader? You mentioned some strong figures in Israeli history, Ariel Sharon, among others.
I know. Well, the thing is to try to bring people that the general public, at least short term, because of the election, will trust. Someone that can give hope to other people. That's why I say Moshe Kahlon can give some hope, because to a large number of people that are really at the political and the I would say economic situation and the social situation are at the bottom, and maybe some hope we can give them.
A public that doesn't have a lot of faith anymore in the political process.
It has to be within a party that people can understand that he can do something.
So let's take a look at this today on the streets. We asked people whether they think that opposition parties will succeed in building a coalition powerful enough to replace Netanyahu.
The answer depends on whether they can all overcome their egos to join forces and to give up their seats or ambition to become prime minister. They can do it. The problem is that we're always spreading around. Every time we have 4 parties, they turn out to be 6.
I really hope so. I just cross my fingers and hope it will really happen.
Netanyahu is much better. He is stronger than them, and I don't think it will happen.
I'll be honest with you, I just moved to Israel not so long ago, so but I like Bibi, I'm happy with Bibi, but I'm not an expert on politics.
I'm not sure they're capable of doing so. I think it's all political games. Everyone who wants the seat is good as long as he's running. But once he gets the seat, he turns into a different person.
I don't believe it will happen. The only thing that can perhaps happen is the merging of the Arab parties, something that would bring them more power and prevent anti-democratic laws. But the right wing will form the next coalition.
I don't know what's more interesting there, the opinions of people on the street or the various haircuts that you find around Tel Aviv these days.
I really don't think that, we should be cynical, and I don't think that we express this lack of hope. And I think that, as I said before, we should not aspire to these sort of historical leaders. We don't have Churchill or Sharon or whomever, or Ben-Gurion or Menachem Begin for that matter. I think, really, I do believe that if we give Herzog the credit, we give him the opportunity, that he might be able to put it off and bring us or put us on a better way. And I think that our challenge now is to come to the people, to go to people, say, hey, give him a chance. Give him a chance. It is time for change. It said times are changing.
What message will Herzog ride to try to convince the people that he is that facility for change?
I think that in the last few days, he is proven an ability to put people together. And I think that what you see with Netanyahu along the years, that people were running away from him. Even today, we have the announcement of Limor Livnat that she is leaving the Likud party. Gideon Sa'ar a few weeks ago.
Sports minister, right? She's leaving.
Exactly. And you see that there is not just a dissolvement of the government, we see a dissolvement of the party itself. And that, I think, indicates a lack of ability, and leadership is not what you come to the UN and you say, okay, how are we going to challenge the Iranian atomic bomb and things like
the
that.
Prime Minister's main
but to be able
responsibility in
to
the Parliament to bring
pull
people
together, yeah, exactly, and work together. We are not aspiring and wanting some dictator, a tyrant, that come and put us on the right road. We need a person who is able to cooperate, to give hope to people, hope to his partners, and to come together and say, okay, guys, enough of this. There's no Churchill, okay? So now there's no Churchill. What are we going to do? Just, we're going to compromise with the existing reality? No.
A lot of questions yet to be answered here in this election campaign coming up. Unfortunately, out of time for this discussion. Many more days we'll be touching on this topic here. Thank you very much, Professor Yossi Yona and Dr. Ranan Bisin, for your time.
Let's just not lose hope, because this election is the last chance for real hope.
It's democracy at work.
I agree.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for joining us. We'll be back after a short break with more news.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, very. After a week full of speculation, the Israeli parliament votes today on whether to dissolve the current government and go to early elections scheduled for March 17th. Arab media reports that 2 Hezbollah operatives, one high-ranking, were killed in the airstrikes yesterday in Syria, allegedly carried out by the Israeli Air Force targeting sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems. And another night of protests against recent police killings across the United States, this time turned violent in Berkeley as demonstrators threw rocks and bottles at police officers and shut down a freeway. Welcome back to the program here. Questions continue to surround a number of dramatic airstrikes Sunday, which reportedly hit Hezbollah targets in Syria, while many in the international community point an accusatory finger at Israel. Well, here's more from I-24 News reporter Shai Ben-Ari.
Details continue to emerge in the wake of a series of airstrikes which took place Sunday in Syrian territory. Arab media reported Monday that 2 Hezbollah operatives were killed in the strikes, one of them a high-ranking officer. Syrian officials said the strikes involving 8 planes may have been targeting shipments of advanced anti-aircraft missiles which were to be transferred to Hezbollah. The missiles were said to be of Russian design, though Syrian military officers denied reports that these were S-300 systems, a defensive weapon often perceived as a game-changer in the Middle Eastern context. Indeed, the Russian Foreign Ministry issued a statement expressing concern over what was termed a dangerous development, the circumstances of which demand an explanation. A letter was also sent by the Russian government to the UN protesting what it called aggressive action by Israel. Meanwhile, in Tehran, the respective foreign ministers of Syria and Iran met Monday with both condemning an Israeli attack. Both governments, however, have other concerns on their minds as well.
We always declared from the outset we have to look for a political solution among Syrian sides and without dangerous and destructive foreign intervention in this regard.
Israel has so far remained silent in the wake of the events, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the unusual step of canceling a scheduled live video link speech to a Washington audience Sunday evening. A pre-recorded version was shown instead. Netanyahu has said in the past that Israel would not allow advanced weaponry to leak over the Syria-Lebanon border and into the hands of Hezbollah. While the credit for the strike on Sunday remains unclear, it seems this policy is being carried out by someone, one way or another.
Well, now we're joined in the studio by Avi Melamed, a fellow at the Eisenhower Institute. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, allegations have come out today. Again, not clear official claim of responsibility by the Israeli government, but we've seen similar attacks over the past years on regime targets in Syria, weapons stockpiles, and now allegations have come out, or at least reports that Hezbollah operatives were killed there. Should Israel expect some form of retaliation now from Hezbollah?
No, I don't think so, at least not in the form of a massive retaliation, not the one that is going to be launched from Lebanon. Hezbollah is right now engaged in different fronts, both in Syria as well as in Lebanon, and in addition to
How
that,
deep are they involved as of now with the Syrian conflict?
they are massively involved in the Syrian conflict. They are paying a very heavy price, the Hezbollah, I mean. There are, just in the last couple of days, they are accumulating reports about dozens of the Hezbollah militants that have been killed, mostly in the area of Al-Kalamoun, which is the mountainous ridge between Syria and Lebanon. This is not a secret. Hezbollah is massively involved in the war in Syria.
They're fighting with jihadists there, correct? Sunni jihadists in these areas?
Well, they are fighting the Syrians and also non-Syrians who are part of the Sunni jihadist groups that operate in the region. We have to remember that in the eyes of the Syrians, which majority of the Syrians are Sunnis as well, in the eyes of the most of the Sunnis in the world, currently Syria is under an Shiite invasion. And the Hezbollah is Shiite, the Iranians and so forth. And so the Hezbollah is finding itself engage in a bloody confrontation against the Syrians and the non-Syrian Sunni groups in Syria. In the same time, Hezbollah is also looking very concerned in what's going on inside the Lebanese arena. Not only the Lebanese public opinion, but also inside the Shiite sect itself, because there is a growing discontent among the Shiites in Lebanon. Basically,
this is not what Hezbollah is mandated to do by the Lebanese government. This is outside of their bounds. They're an armed group officially to face off against Israel in southern Lebanon. So now invading Syria and fighting alongside the Assad regime, how does this throw off everything balance, at least in Lebanon?
Because Lebanon, to a large extent, is controlled by the Hezbollah, and if you want to be more accurate, by the Iranians. The Hezbollah basically established its own mini-state inside Lebanon, practically speaking, forcing its political will on the Lebanese, or if you want to be more accurate, forcing the Iranian interest and agenda on the Lebanese.
Basically, they're the strongest faction, the best armed and now experienced in combat, so there is no challenge.
Yes, and I'll share with you an interesting story. Right now, the Lebanese are engaged with the story of Lebanese soldiers that have been kidnapped by the Islamic Sunni jihadist groups in Syria. Recently, the Hezbollah that opposed any kind of a swap deal between the Lebanese government and the kidnappers, Hezbollah himself signed a deal with one of the Sunni organizations that kidnapped one of the Hezbollah's militants. That put Hezbollah in a very embarrassing light, so I was speaking today inside the Lebanese arena. The bottom line, the Hezbollah is controlling Lebanon to a large extent, but he is massively involved right now in the war in Syria. We don't expect retaliation coming from Lebanon necessarily, but we have to remember one thing. The Hezbollah is very sophisticated and very productive when it comes to find all kind of creative ways to retaliate.
So Israel, for now, keeping a close eye. Avi Melamed, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the British and Canadian embassies in Cairo have suspended all public services for security reasons. Well, both embassies declined to give more details due to the sensitive nature of the matter, but they did say they were working with Egyptian authorities to resume operations as soon as possible. A message on the Canadian embassy's website read, quote, "The ability to provide consular services may occasionally be limited for short periods due to unsettled security conditions," close quote. Well, in the United States, violent protests against police brutality continue. Last night, thousands of protesters clashed with police in Berkeley, California, as police fired tear gas to disperse the demonstration. I-24 News reporter Uri Shapira has more.
Another day of violence across the U.S. and the temperature in the streets is heating up. On the second day of protest in Berkeley, California, what began as a peaceful rally ended in violence as protesters threw cement blocks and explosives at police officers who responded with tear gas.
People were throwing these crates at it, just breaking it. There were the people with mostly covered faces, of course, and then people started walking up and taking some of the bottles.
The outrage sparked after a series of racial disputes which reached new heights after a grand jury decided not to bring charges against the police officers in the chokehold death of African-American Eric Garner. This comes after another similar case where the police officer who shot young African-American Michael Brown was also acquitted in court. Thousands of people took to the streets and demanded justice. In some cases, like in New York, protesters also displayed an anti-capitalist agenda as they stormed into main stores in the city during the Thanksgiving holiday.
We will not buy anything!
But what began as a protest against the racial injustice in the U.S. courts turned into a protest against the police, who, according to demonstrators, abused power.
I tripped over a woman who had fallen down, and I stopped to help her. My back was to the police line, and as I was lifting her up, I looked over my shoulder and saw the officer raise his baton.
The Northern California city of Berkeley, which has one of the most prestigious universities in the U.S., is known for its political awareness, one that gave birth to a series of mass protests in the 1960s and 1970s against the war in Vietnam and for human rights. Now this city is demonstrating against a new injustice alongside other cities which do not necessarily have African-American majorities. President Barack Obama tried to ease the tension, but also admitted it may take time to solve this deep-rooted race issue, an issue which has come to the fore once again and is threatening to burn the entire country.
Well, the death toll in the Philippines continued to rise on Monday, despite reports that the typhoon that struck the island nation had weakened. Well, the storm displaced an estimated 1 million people, yet thousands are now reportedly heading home. Ivan Siksek has the story.
At least 27 people have died as a result of the deadly storm that has battered the Philippines for days as it thundered from one island to the other, moving closer to the densely populated capital city. Tropical storm Hagapit first slammed into the eastern Philippines late Saturday, driving hundreds of thousands of people from their houses. While humanitarian aid is pending the clearance of damaged roads, Greenpeace International Executive Director Kumi Naidu addressed the country's volatile position.
The location of the Philippines, which always was prone to typhoons. What we are seeing now, though, is the intensity of the typhoons getting stronger and stronger.
The evacuation of nearly 1 million people indicates that important lessons have been learned since last year, when the Philippines was struck by Typhoon Haiyan. In 2013, over 70,000 people were reported dead or missing due to ill preparation for natural disasters. Typhoon Hagapit is projected to move from the city of Tacloban in the Philippines to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Despite the downgrade of the storm to Category 2 from the highest level of 5 on Saturday, major operations are still underway to clear debris and get supplies to people left homeless or without power after the typhoon flattened houses and tore down power lines.
And now for a look at the economy. And we're joined by Daniel Roth here from our Economy magazine. Daniel, great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're looking at Japan. What can you tell us?
So Japan, third largest economy in the world, in recession. Surprise recession,
at first they thought it was going to be a growth quarter. Third quarter, it wasn't. Now, just today, they figured out it's actually a worse recession than they thought. They thought it would be 1.6% contraction. Is actually 1.9, so just about 2% contraction.
So people are panicked now in the marketplaces somewhat, are looking at the situation?
Well, this is the interesting thing. Because it's such a large economy, everything moves slowly. So for, the Bank of Japan isn't necessarily putting on the brakes. But this recession announcement a couple of weeks ago led Prime Minister Abe, who's kind of the architect of Abenomics, to call a snap election as a sort of referendum.
In a matter of days, right?
Yeah, it's happening on Sunday. So just under a week from now, they're going to go to the polls, tell Abe if they want him to stay the course. Of course, he's changed things a little bit. There was supposed to be a second sales tax this year. They went from 5 to 8% in the spring. They were going to go up to 10% this fall. That's being pushed back by 2 years.
It's somewhat scandalous on Abe's government. I mean, first of all, yes, he's the architect of this economic policy, but they've had a lot of elections in the last decade now. I mean, to go back to elections now, is this, again, is he under fire here in this situation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And nobody knows what's going to happen for Abe in the next week or so. It could be that the populace says, look, we like what you're doing, we understand what you're doing, keep doing it. A lot of people think that won't happen because this is the second recession quarter in a row. You're talking about consumer spending going down incredibly since the first sales tax hike. You're talking about investment going down. They thought investment would shrink by 0.02%. It actually shrunk by twice that in the quarter. So you're talking about major shifts in how much money is being spent, which seems to be the real shortcoming in Abenomics.
It's a major economy. Again, you mentioned the third largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
For decades, a leader with progressive policy here. Definitely some reason to pay attention here. Thank you very much, Daniel Roth, for looking at the economy here.
Thank you.
Well, the Iranian regime is set to block internet access to all quote-unquote unidentified users in the latest crackdown on web freedom by the regime. Well, here's more from I-24 News correspondent Shachar Pellet.
In the future, when people will want to use the internet, they will be identified, and there will be no web surfer whose identity we do not know.
Iran's telecommunications minister has confirmed that the country is developing a system which would identify every user who logs onto the internet.
The internet and the digital age give the ability to the regime, in this case the Iranian regime, for more than a decade to create a mass surveillance program.
The new technology joins a long list of tools Iran is using to supervise its citizens. Alongside filtering of content, services such as Facebook, YouTube and Twitter have been repeatedly banned in the country since the 2009 elections, in which opposition was harshly suppressed. In 2011, a special internet police unit was formed in the Islamic Republic to curb cybercrimes and track Iranians' online activity across social networks. In the past year, the Iranian court system ordered the blocking of the popular Instagram photo-sharing social media app over privacy concerns, and also ordered the shutdown of Viber and WhatsApp after the messaging applications were allegedly used to insult certain Iranian officials, but they remain accessible so far.
Iranian internet users find all kinds of ways from time to time with the aid of external users and external organizations how to bypass these limitations.
The idea behind the new identification technology is to deter users from posting or reading allegedly contentious material. Wider plans to introduce filtering services and blocking more content are also set for the near future, as it appears that in 6 months, 30 million Iranian internet users will have more reason for concern.
Well, the construction of the West Bank separation barrier in the wake of the Second Palestinian Intifada, a number of Arab communities found themselves divided in two. The village of Barta is different, as the decision was made to leave the community whole with the barrier built outside the village. Our correspondent Shai Ben-Ari was in Barta yesterday.
The first hint that there is something different about the village of Barta comes with the license plates. Here, the yellow Israeli ones can be found on the same streets as their green and white Palestinian counterparts. Barta is a village divided between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. The sewage trench here behind me, which runs right through the village, marks the actual boundary between Israel on the one side and the territory controlled by the Palestinian Authority on the other. Unlike other sections of this border, here there is no separation wall to be found, and as you can see, it's pretty easy to get from one side to the other. This unique situation allows for unique opportunities. Low-priced goods from the West Bank are brought into Barta, attracting shoppers looking for a good deal, primarily Arab Israelis, as well as some Jews.
In effect, we have here a free economic market, no customs, no VAT, nothing. And that gave this village a huge boost.
From an economic point of view, everybody wins, and people here seem interested in keeping it that way.
People here are more occupied with their livelihood and their education, and not with existential questions such as where will I get my food from? A hungry man will steal, even murder, in order to eat.
Still, not everyone is happy here, and you don't have to look hard to be reminded of the more difficult realities present. The Palestinian residents, as well as those visiting from the West Bank, are not legally allowed to enter the Israeli half of the village, let alone the rest of Israel, even though doing so is easy enough.
If you have a Palestinian ID card, you aren't allowed past this roundabout. If you are caught on this side, it's 3 months in prison or a 9,000 shekel fine.
A few minutes' drive from the village is Rehan checkpoint, which leads into the West Bank.
When they close the checkpoint at 9 p.m., if my son is sick or injured at 10 p.m., I have to wait for an hour or two by the checkpoint. He can die. Think about it. You think it's a democratic country, but that's a joke.
But despite complexities that exist here as in other places, some see Barta as an example. The interaction between Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, and Jews creates a basis of economic cooperation, which can potentially serve as a platform for greater things, as well as a reminder that all here have something to lose. At the end of the day, peace is based first of all on mutual interests, before friendship and even moral considerations. Some might say the reality in Barta today offers a glimpse into a more positive potential future.
And now for a look at the day's sports news. We're joined by our sports analyst, Yoav Borowitz. Yoav, thanks for being with us.
Good evening, David.
We had an incredible night in football yesterday. Two of the biggest stars, really just nonstop impressing people. Tell us about it.
Yes, we can talk forever about Cristiano Ronaldo and Leo Messi, the unidentical twins, but in some ways identical. Last night, they both scored hat-tricks. Ronaldo, it's the 23rd hat-trick of his career. Messi, his 22nd. Those guys are just scoring nonstop. And David, they are not your classic central forwards, the number 9s. They don't play just in the middle and just being there, scoring the goals. They're all over the place. They're playing in the flanks. They're playing in the back. They come front. You know, they have the dribble. Very different kinds of players. You know, Messi with the immense, just the control over the ball. Ronaldo, the perfect athlete, can do everything. Still, most people would say that Messi is better because he scores slightly bit more. But in the last 2 years, Ronaldo is scoring more. Just, you know, and we're talking, you know, we're in an era in football that you don't have those huge stars, you know.
Is this good for the game? I mean, to be so dominated by two guys that really no one can come near?
It is not good, and it's good. It's not good because it's entertaining. There's no competition just between those two, you know. Nobody even comes close to those two. But it's good because the whole world is just, you know, gripped by this competition. They're not friends. They don't like each other. They're very, very, very different.
True competitors.
You know, the way, but true competitors, true players. And those are people that, you know, our grandchildren, 50, 60 years down the road, will be talking about those guys because these guys are eternal. I
sense the excitement with you, no question.
Just like we can talk about Pelé, they'll talk about those
Chelsea
guys.
seems to be losing their top spot in England now.
Yes, you know, Jose Mourinho had a great start of the year, and Chelsea were very strong. Diego Costa came from Spain to England, scored nonstop, but lately they're not as sharp. Manchester City are, you know, gaining grounds, just 3 points now the gap in the top. But we're seeing now the guy Sergio Aguero, the great striker of Manchester City, got injured, won't be playing in the next month. This might help Jose Mourinho and Chelsea, but also it's a very, very interesting fight in the top of the Premier League.
Neck and neck. Now, LA Galaxy just won the championship in the U.S.
Yes, moving, you know, across the pond.
And their star, Landon Donovan. I mean, this guy is...
5th championship for LA Galaxy, winning the ML Cup again against New England Revolution, who lost it 5 times, you know, the biggest loser of U.S. soccer. But let's talk about the winner, Landon Donovan. The guy is 32 years old, decided to, you know, put his boots, to tie his boots, you know, not play anymore. And this is a loss for the game of football because this guy is the first American guy who was able to transcend soccer And it was a small sport, beloved by a very few people, maybe immigrants, diehards. Today, it's mainstream a lot because of Landon Donovan, a lot of because of his miracles, his great goals, the goal against Algeria and the World Cup. Yeah. All the goals he scored in the World Cup, all the goals he scored in MLS. He's the all-time leading scorer in the MLS, all-time leading assist guy. Just a great
so he's
guy.
hanging up his cleats, unfortunately, moving to the history books. So, Yoav Borowitz, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, now here, following the last violent incident in Jerusalem now. Moving to this story, Mayor Nir Barkat toured the seam zone of the city, the divide between East and West Jerusalem, and gave his perspective on the situation in the eastern neighborhood of the capital, caught between development and conflict.
Beit Hanina, an Arab quarter in East Jerusalem. Over the past few weeks, clashes between young Palestinians and the Israeli police have spread throughout the neighborhood. To deal with the violence, the municipality has decided to invest in education. In 2014, the city dedicated $23 million to the construction of schools and other infrastructure in Beit Hanina and the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Shuafat. Sunday morning, the mayor of Jerusalem proudly visited this school, the symbol of an achievable coexistence. But for the principal of the school, there still remains a lot to do.
It's equipping it. We need furniture. We need laboratories. We need computers. We need many things.
Israel announced it would speed up the construction of 1,000 housing units in East Jerusalem, a decision slammed by the United States and Europe, convinced it would contribute to aggressive tensions. Faced with the controversy, the mayor tries to justify himself.
Or does anybody tell me as mayor of Jerusalem that if somebody wants to build a piece of land, I should ask him, wait a minute, if you're Jewish, you're not allowed, if you're Christian, you're not allowed, only if you're Muslim, you're allowed, or you're black?
According to the police estimates, the housing project may reduce the violence rate by 50% in the medium term. The municipality's main objective is, above all, security. Usually 3,000 police officers are deployed in Jerusalem, but for now there are 1,200 more.
If we just look back over the last couple of hours, the last incident that took place was in Atur, which you can see just behind me. Those of you that are familiar with the Atur neighborhood is just to the right where you can see the surveillance balloon. And there, just over an hour ago, there were 2 petrol bombs that were thrown, and there were fireworks that were fired at one of the houses there, where police responded to by only using non-lethal weapons.
A precocious calm prevails in the Holy City. The police is on high alert since the November 18 attack on a synagogue. Clashes break out on a regular basis in Shuafat, Silwan, and Abu Tur. But the municipality wants to show that Jerusalem remains one and undivided at any cost.
Well, again, our main story today, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, is voting and debating as we speak to dissolve this current government and move to early elections slated for March 17th this coming year. Again, this debate taking place right now, votes happening in the parliament, all but certain that, yes, the government will dissolve and early elections will be called, the process playing out at this moment. And now for a look at today's culture news. Well, joining us now in the studio is our culture correspondent, Shachar Peled, with the latest in cultural news. Shachar, thanks for being with us.
Hi, David. Good evening.
What do you have for us today?
Well, some culture news, other news. We start with last night, the annual Kennedy Center Awards, which honor actors and performers of stage and screen. They have been awarded since 1978 in Washington, D.C. by none other than the American president. So this year, among the recipients were 2-time Oscar winner Tom Hanks, veteran actress Lily Tomlin, and
very official ceremony here.
British musician Sting. You don't really see Sting wearing this tuxedo and this medal. This is a very, a very significant and formal stage, and it's also an opportunity for President Obama to crack some jokes at their expense, of course. So, for example, in Sting's case, he revealed that he was very much bullied in his childhood, nicknamed Lurch before he was nicknamed Sting, and he also revealed he was once a teacher, a constructor worker, and was working in a tax office. So that could have been an entirely different career for Sting.
So not always an international music
Absolutely,
pop icon.
yes. Working in a tax office, I can't really imagine that. Also making fun of earlier Tom Hanks movies such as Joe versus the Volcano, which wasn't one of his best, and saying it was balanced by movies celebrities like Big and Apollo 13 in Philadelphia, of course, and quoting
that's
is
fair of the president.
Yes,
Okay.
quoting is famous quotes. Mom always said life was like a box of chocolate, and Houston, we have a problem. So a very entertaining evening. We move to today. The exact date today, 34 years ago, 40-year-old John Lennon was murdered. To the date, at around 10:50 p.m., he was walking back with his wife Yoko Ono to their house in New York City, the famous Dakota building, where Mark David Chapman shot him 4 times in the back. He was pronounced dead on arrival, and shocking the world. His body was cremated and ashes scattered around Central Park, where today the Strawberry Fields Memorial is a very famous memorial for people all over the world to come. And on a TV interview this weekend, Paul McCartney revealed how he got the message the morning after, how shocked he was, but how thankful he was for repairing the friendship that, of course, we know for years there was a dispute between the two legendary musicians, and he was at least thankful that their friendship was repaired. He also had some tough words for the convicted killer Chapman. He said he was very much shocked that the shooting was so random and so senseless. There was no political organization, although there are many conspiracies, of course, but not really something ideological standing behind it. I quote,
shocking, sad day.
A sad day. He says, and I quote him, the phrase kept coming in my head, the jerk of all jerks. He calls Chapman, who, by the way, remains jailed after pleading guilty 8 times to second-degree murder.
Thank you for bringing us these look at the day's cultural news. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back after another break with the Daily Debate.